Hey, it's Coach Anderson here again, Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to pick up with Lesson 2, the Spanish-American War on Imperialism. A different kind of war. The Spanish-American War is different from any kind of war that the United States of America fought up to that point, primarily because it was a naval action. Remember the Great White Fleet that we talked about? It gets broken in the right way. We, of course, send a portion of the Great White Fleet over to the Caribbean, to Cuba, and then we send another portion of the Great White Fleet, of course, to the Pacific, to the Philippines, and where the Spanish Navy, of course, was. So when we look at it, it's a different war in that the United States of America fights it in two different areas, primarily on the water. There will be some ground fighting, but primarily on the water. Commodore George Dewey, of course, was sent to the Philippines to attack the Spanish fleet there. After the Battle of Manila Bay in the Philippines, Dewey was able to seize control of the Philippines in 7 days, and American troops also seized control of Guam, a Spanish colony. So we were afraid that the United States of America, of course, wouldn't be up to the task of defeating Spain. Well, we defeat the Spanish in the Pacific in basically in about a week's time. And because of that, we're going to find that the United States of America is going to be able to take over some colonies there, Guam and the Philippines, as a result of the Spanish-American War. One of the things that does happen, though, is the United States of America will be aided on the ground by some Filipino rebels led by a man by the name of Emilio Aguinaldo. He, of course, is a person that helps the United States of America in the war against Spain. But when the war is over with, he expects, like a lot of other people expect, that the United States of America is going to turn the Philippines back over to the Filipinos when the war is over. Little they know that wasn't what was going to happen. Now you should know that already because we talked about it, of course, in the Do Now activity, of course, with William McKinley. Here's Commodore George Dewey that was sent to the Philippines. Now, one of the things that we can tell you this, we noticed something when we fight the Spanish-American War too. We had a problem. We had a Great White Fleet, but what happens if we needed more of those men from the Philippines to be over to the Caribbean? Well, in order to do that, they had to go all the way around South America, the tip of South America, come back up the eastern coast of South America, and then go to the Philippines if they were coming from the Pacific Ocean. What we figured out is that we needed a shortcut between North America, of course, and South America, so that we can get our Navy, of course, from the Pacific Ocean quicker to the Atlantic Ocean, and from the Atlantic Ocean quicker, of course, to the Pacific Ocean. So because of that, we're going to start thinking about that, and we're going to have to come up with a solution that we can link the oceans with a shortcut, so the America's Navy, of course, could have quick access to both oceans. The ground war in Cuba. Primarily we said the Spanish-American War, of course, was a naval action, but there are some ground fighting. One of the most noteworthy, of course, happens in San Juan in Santiago, in San Juan. Theodore Roosevelt led a group of volunteers called the Rough Riders. He, along with another group, the 9th and the 10th African-American Cavalry, of course, in Cuba, they attacked San Juan Hill basically and freed and took control by winning that battle, basically in the war, of course, in Cuba. So when we look at it, so the fight in Havana Harbor, of course, and Santiago Harbor, and then, of course, the efforts of the Rough Riders and the 9th and 10th Cavalry at San Juan Hill is going to effectively end the war. And the United States of America will emerge from this war, and in less than a little over a month's time, will defeat the Spanish. And because of that defeat, one of the things that happens, of course, the United States of America is thrust into the idea of becoming a world power for the first time. Here's a picture of the Rough Riders in the middle, right there in front of the flag. You'll see Theodore Roosevelt, the one that has a hand on his gun. He'll eventually, of course, become the President of the United States of America. Creation of an American empire. The American defeat of the Spanish caused a debate over what to do with the newly liberated nations. The Anti-Imperialist League was formed to oppose American colonization. They didn't believe that the United States of America should engage in colonization or imperialism. They included prominent Americans like Andrew Carnegie, Samuel Gompers, William Jennings Bryan, Jane Addams, Mark Twain. All of them opposed, of course, colonization because of the fact that the United States of America was a colony at one point itself.
The Treaty of Paris of 1898 gave the U.S. control of the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico, and the U.S. had a decision to make regarding Cuba. Well, we fought this war, of course, because the Cubans were trying to gain independence from Spain. If we don't allow the Cubans, of course, to have their independence, then we, as a nation, of course, are a nation of hypocrites, because we supposedly fought the war to gain Cuban independence. And at the end of the day, the Cubans will be the one of the only four of those four nations, of course, that will gain its independence. In 1898, it was the turning point in American history, because that year, the United States emerged as the major world power with the swift and sound defeat of Spain, especially when people didn't think that we could do it. Cuban independence. The U.S. had promised the Cubans their independence, and there were some stipulations. They created the Platt Amendment, which outlined how the Cubans, of course, would get their independence. They had to go through a process. There are stipulations that were placed. There were some things that they had to do. That's what stipulation means. There were some little things that they had to do, some requirements that they had to do before they could, of course, get their independence. Number one, they couldn't enter a treaty with another nation. That means this here. Until the United States of America gave them permission to do so, they could not engage in talks, of course, with a foreign nation. The U.S. could buy or lease a naval station in Cuba. Cuban debts to other nations had to be kept low to prevent another nation from sending troops to gain payment. And the U.S. could intervene in Cuba to keep the peace. So Cuba does get their independence, but they only get their independence when the United States of America relinquishes control or gives up control to the new Cuban government that is formed. Governing Puerto Rico. So what do we do with Puerto Rico? Well, we passed the Four-Acre Act in 1900. And basically what the Four-Acre Act does is it makes the United States of America the protector of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico in 1917 becomes a commonwealth, a territory of the United States of America. And if you live in Puerto Rico today, of course, you are an American citizen. So Puerto Rico is still a self-governing commonwealth, but it is basically looks to the United States of America for its defense. So the Filipino fight for independence. So we know what we're going to do with Cuba. We know what we're going to do with Puerto Rico. Now, what do we do with the Filipinos? Well, when the war against Spain is over with and the United States of America failed to turn over control to the Filipinos under the leadership of Emilio Aguinaldo decided that what they would do, of course, is do what they had been doing against the Spanish. And that, of course, is attack the United States of America at every chance, fight a guerrilla warfare, where they would do sneak attacks, of course, on American installations, and hope that they could put enough pressure on the United States of America so that the United States of America would just give up and give them their independence. Well, that didn't happen. The United States of America installed William Howard Taft as the governor of the Philippines, and the United States of America sets up a provisional government in the Philippines to run the Philippines until we felt like that they were in a position that we could give it and turn it back over to them. The U.S. in 1901 captured Emilio Aguinaldo, the leader of the Filipino independence movement, and we established the United States of America in terms of a naval base there, I think at Subic Bay. So we were able to maintain control of the Philippines up until 1946, and we eventually turned over the naval base in the Philippines, I think in the early 1900s. Well, in the late 1900s, 1980s if I'm not mistaken. Here's a picture of the leader of the Filipino independence movement, Emilio Aguinaldo. The cost of the Spanish-American War. Well, in terms of monetary cost, it was a pretty big, investment. So when you looked at it, American investment jumped from $700 million in the Pacific in 1897 to $2.5 billion. So because we spread in there, we put more money, of course, into the region. And the war in and of itself, kind of pays for itself, but we're going to find that what does happen because is going to be the human cost. There are going to be like 9,600 American soldiers, of course, that'll be killed, and we'll spend over $400 million in terms of the fighting of this particular war. But the one thing, of course, that comes out of it is the fact that the United States of America becomes a world power. And for the first time, people talk about the United States of America in the same breath as they talk about England. They talk about it in the same breath that they talk about France, and they talk about it in the same breath that they talk about countries like Germany. So that for the first time, the United States of America is going to be looked upon on the world stage as a world power, because we had defeated one of those world powers. All right, we told you we had 3 lesson-focused questions that go along with this lesson, and we want you to be kind of aware of what they are and kind of formulate your own ideas in terms of what the answers could be. The first question, what factors caused the Spanish-American War? 2, what made the Spanish-American War unique in American military history to that point? And trace the United States actions that led to its early colonial empire. Well, we'll give you a few moments. You can look at those questions, of course, create your own answer, and we'll come back in a few minutes and see what your answers could be. Well, okay then. You should have had enough time that you were able to go through, of course, and write down what your possible answers could be. So let's have a look and see what I came up with. Now, please understand that the answers that I came up don't necessarily have to be the same ones that you have, but these are some of the things I thought you should consider when you're answering these questions. Number 1, what factors caused the Spanish-American War? Sugar plantations in Cuba generated a lot of wealth for the United States and was a major trading partner with Cuba. American businessmen invested heavily in Cuba and wanted their interests protected, and the continued conflict between Spain and Cuba threatened business. And then, of course, we have that idea of yellow journalism that you could have thrown in terms of Hearst and Pulitzer. What made the Spanish-American War unique in the American military history at that point? It was largely a naval action, and it was fought outside the United States in 2 different oceans. 3, trace the United States actions that led to its early colonial empire through annexation of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines from the Spanish-American War, and by gaining influence in places like Samoa and Hawaii through coups and conquests. So the United States of America is going to be able to take over different places around the world because, even though we're reluctant, but because of our need, of course, for markets for industrial products and our desire, of course, to spread American influence, we'll take over these places throughout the Pacific. There's a practice question for you. Once again, the whole purpose, for going through these questions, of course, is so that you'll familiarize yourself with what's on the map test. One of the questions that you might see is yellow journalism influenced American participation in which war? And that, of course, was the Spanish-American War. Remember Hearst and Pulitzer with yellow journalism. Give you one more. How did territorial acquisition resulting from the Spanish-American War affect the United States economy? A, the United States sought to control European trade. B, the United States gained access to overseas markets. C, the United States tariff policy became more strictly enforced. D, the United States imports of Chinese imports created a trade imbalance. Give you a moment. Okay, and the answer is the United States gained access to overseas markets. Whoa, we got a third question. I thought it was only 2. But the third question, which concept is best related to these actions? Results of the Spanish-American War, new territories for the U.S., expanded American influence into Asia and the Caribbean, increased cost of the Navy. So which concept is best related to these actions? A, populism, B, progressivism, C, imperialism, D, jingoism. The answer would be, of course, imperialism or colony building. All right, that's the end of lesson 2 on the United States of America's quest, of course, for becoming imperialistic, of course, and gaining colonies. One of the things that we want you to understand about this particular lesson is the fact that the United States of America kind of reluctantly becomes an imperialist nation, and there was a huge contingent of Americans that did not like the idea of the United States of America becoming a colonial nation. But at the end of the day, because of the efforts of people like Hearst and Pulitzer, and because of the need to spread American influence, we're going to find that at the end of the day, imperialism kind of wins out. Remember, please don't take my word for it. It's American history, and because it's American history, remember, it's still your history.